this podcast, we speak to Blue Badge tour guide Rob, who talks about London, cultural heritage, and his experience providing tours in the capital.
So, if you'd like to just begin by maybe explaining a bit about your role or what you do.
Yeah, well, I mean, I had a background in writing books, which it seems incredibly old-fashioned, travel books now, but was, before the internet was your main source of information if you wanted to go abroad, other than just going to the tourist office. And, it was very, very successful, sold loads and loads of copies, but obviously the internet came in, and book publishers found it really hard to switch to online. It's never really going to happen. They're publishers. But people stopped buying books. People get critical reviews easily online. And so I jumped ship as well and retrained to be a tour guide. I sort of started just being voluntary. I went on a couple of courses. I thought, I could probably do that. I could probably do it better, actually. And so then, obviously it was kind of, I did the London course. It's probably the most intense course that exists in the entire world in terms of getting your official badge. Apparently in Rome, it takes 6 months or whatever. They do 18 months. You take 11 exams, 7 practical, 4 written. I know, literally, look, I went to Cambridge, okay? This was pretty hard work, I'm not lying. And London's got a long history, and it's big. So that was really challenging but amazing. Though I knew loads, when you write a book, you don't retain it up here. So performing it, and then I realized that it's about performance, which of course helps because of my theatre background. So I was like, actually, this is about entertainment and performance. And it's also about telling narratives. And that obviously in the last 18 months has been really interesting because I've been trying to bang a narrative, which now is so much easier to bang. So I'm actually really raring to go because previously I was like, oh, Rob, you're banging on about the usual stuff, immigration, diversity, slavery, blah, 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 right? But now, that's like people, I think, are much more open to it because of everything that's happened. So I'm sort of looking forward to it. I haven't done anything about it because it's still all bloody difficult at the moment. Nobody wants to go on group tours. No one wants to, But that's my background, as it were, if that's enough.
So you're if it wasn't, let's take the pandemic out of it, you would be currently operating as a tour guide in London, is that right? Yeah,
absolutely. So it's a totally freelance world. There are agencies out there who do corporate stuff, they just meet and greet groups who are coming over. So obviously that's not happening. I've done a little bit of that. That's not that great. That's just chitty chatty, There are school groups, loads of school groups come over, and that is starting to happen again. That's where you can be a real educator. You are defining the narrative. You are, what you say. So you're going to the big sites. They want to go to the obvious stuff. They want to go to the Tower and the Abbey. That's why you need the badge, because you can't guide in those places without the badge.
The blue guide badge, is that right?
Blue badge guide, that's right. Blue, I can't even say it myself. London blue badge guide. Yeah, the badge, whatever. I'll put it up there. I'll dust it off. It's not been used. So you get Dutch groups. Sometimes they want in English anyway, because I only guide in English. So a lot of Dutch groups just want English as well. French ones as well. Sometimes they want English when actually the kids don't want English, because they don't really understand. So I've done a Japanese group where it was down to sort of Trafalgar Square. That's about it. So that wasn't good. So you have to be careful. But that's been, I think that's been quite fun. I do oldies as well, are a massive business. So people are living much, much longer. University of the Third Age, stuff like that. I've done quite a bit of that. It's good to do a variety. It's really nice. I've done stuff for Stan and his mates, who are the classic ones. So they're in their 20s, right? They're the classic do tourism like my generation did. So they're quite difficult to engage. They're educated, that lot, but they're still quite difficult. They're resistant to it. So you have to pull them in with something a bit more. Stan's gay and a lot of his friends are gay. So I did an LGBTQ plus tour of the Natural History Museum.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Very easy. Top 10 gay animals, just look it up on the internet. It's all over the internet, I tell you. But I mean, that was really successful. It was great. It was a really good way of dragging him in. And, I didn't just exclusively do that, but there was lots of that banter as part of the tour. And I'm just before the pandemic, I was about to do one for the British Museum, on a similar line, because they did do one. They did a sort of self-guided one with a leaflet, but it is much more exciting to have someone do it if they do it well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I do a mix. It's funny. You just go down weird avenues. I mean, I've got quite a posh school, Tunbridge School in Kent, and they have a parents' association who have the most unbelievable cultural program. I mean, it's a 28-page PDF online, right, with events before the pandemic. So I got in with them, which felt weird because they're like quite privileged, wealthy. But what's great, of course, is they're sort of liberal with a little L, probably slightly right of centre. So I bring them in with my charm, and I'm really good at not using keywords that'll set them off. But you can actually put in a lot of politics in there and pull them in. I did a whole one on slavery. I took them to the Museum of London Docklands. I've learned from other guides. There's a really great guy of mixed heritage who also does slavery stuff. And he's such a gentle guy. He just lays out the facts in the most gentle way, which is so horrific. You're going, oh my God. He's not giving any line. He's just literally going, this is what happened.
Yeah.
Here's the evidence. Look at it. And it's a really powerful gallery, probably the most powerful gallery on slavery that I've been to, certainly in London. It's in the Museum of London Docklands. So I did one of those with them, so that's, in some ways, that can be almost more fulfilling, because obviously doing it to my kids and their mates is preaching to the converted to a certain degree.
Yeah.
But it's still education, because they don't know that much, like most people don't, if it's not their job.
Yeah.
So it would be a mixture of those things, and of course, to earn my bread and butter, rich Americans, because they do employ a lot of guides because they've just got the money.
Yeah.
But again, you're sort of feeling like, what am I doing? But they're also movers and shakers, and they like to think of themselves as liberals because they're over here in Britain, and that's quite liberal. And they're not Trump supporters mostly. Yeah. So I've had interesting discussions with them as well, and they're from all over the States. And the Americans are very open to discussion as well. So it's part of painting a picture. I'm just a little cog in that, but it feels worthwhile in that way. Yeah.
So
go on.
Asked, what kind of tours you did, but you kind of explained that then. So it seems like you sort of tailor your tours depending on who you're who's
absolutely yeah.
And do you do
so what the
research depending on that, or do you feel like you can just put them together?
No, I mean, so basically the course teaches you the bread and butter stuff that you're very likely to be asked. So the sites that you do are the British Museum, National Gallery, St Paul's Cathedral, Westminster Abbey, the Tower of London, and a walk somewhere in London, central London. And then you're taught to do the coach as well, which gives you a lot of, so you have to do the commentary on the coach, which is the whole of central London, really. So you've got a bit of a grounding anyway in the whole of central London. So if someone says, I want to go on a walk around Chelsea, you do know, the coach bit that you've learned, but it's still going to take you a while to learn it. It depends who the client is. If it's some rich Americans, they just want to go on a pub tour down Fleet Street.
Yeah.
I mean, when you first do it, you learn loads and you go, of course, they just want to have a chat.
Yeah.
And what they almost want to have a chat to is someone who lives in London.
Yeah.
And has a British mentality, as they call it. So then sometimes you feel passionate about something, you think, I'm going to create something and try and put it out there. That's much more difficult.
Yeah.
I take quite a passive role, partly because I run a theatre as well, so I hope that the jobs come to me. If they're too boring, I mean, it's nice to have a variety. Because, fair enough, first-time tourists just want to go to the big stuff they haven't seen. They want to go and see the London Eye and Big Ben and Parliament and all that stuff. But you can still weave interesting narratives. The way you present Parliament or you present the Abbey can be so different depending on your client group, which it has to be.
Yeah.
and especially with young people. I mean, I
Yeah.
teach on the course as well now,
Mhm.
and I always say, it's all about engaging the group. And if you've got young people, their attention span is very short.
Mhm.
You've got to grab them, and you've got to use some pretty cheap tricks sometimes, which I do. So blood and guts always grabs their attention.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of nasty blood and guts spilled.
Yeah.
So if you grab their attention with that, you kind of pull them, and then you can maybe give them something else.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Do you have like favorite spots that you like that you are your favorite ones to do tours around, or favorite things to?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Westminster Abbey, of the big stuff, Westminster Abbey and the Tower are both actually really nice places to go, because there's so much history there, and you really can choose to tell what you like. So, for example, at the Tower, I really like this one story, which is that so during the Second World War, they actually took spies, and the First World War, German spies that were captured were taken there and executed. I mean, they were shot. So the last execution in the Tower of London was in 1941, which loads of people don't realise.
Yeah.
And the last one was a really unfortunate guy who basically was in prison in Germany and was forced by the Nazis to fly in and be a spy and be parachuted in. But he broke his ankle on landing, was immediately captured, false papers, civilian clothes, so he's a spy, taken to the Tower of London and shot. And his granddaughter came and visited like a few years ago, and kind of, to pay her respects to a grandfather she never knew, who wanted to be a spy. And I don't know, like stories like that are really good for getting people to think slightly differently. Like it's so easy, like us against the Germans, War two, the game's not over, or whatever the stupid phrase is, So you can, you know what I mean? Like that's just one
making it human, I guess, and like talking about like everyone has a granddaughter that's and
exactly.
Completely.
So you can play with those stories. So I like those two sites, big sites, because of that. If I was to choose like what I want to do, I mean, I like the East End, Spitalfields area, because again, it's got layers and layers of history, and you can talk about immigration and diversity in London. And it's got street art, so it's a really good one to do with young people. I did street art.
Sorry, no, we have to design 2 tours as part of this, and they were supposed to be done. Well, we'd ideally like to do them in person. However, at the moment it is just too difficult. So I was using Google Tour Builder, but then it's actually moving over to Google Earth. But I think I was going to do an East End one as well. So yeah, if you've got any recommendations for that would be. So
the East End tour is really good because there's history, but you've also got, and there's markets, so it's kind of got a lively feel. Brick Lane, there's lots of action, but it's also got street art. So which now I was looking at street art like, do I like street art? I'm a proper snob, and I was like, okay, no. I mean, I'm also super open-minded, so I'm like, no, let's look at it. Well, number one, it's really easy to learn because all street artists have a very specific way of painting, even more than artists. You know what I mean? They have a style, and also I kind of learned you can actually talk about the politics of street art, because that's also quite interesting. Because you've got street artists coming from below, like literal street artists, often people who are homeless or from quite a rough background, and then you've got people who are graphic artists or even fine artists who realize that you're never going to engage young people and get them to come into the National Gallery. They're just not going to go in there, but you will engage them if you go out into the streets and stick your stuff on the wall. And there was money to be made in it, and there are galleries around the East End where you've seen the stuff, you can buy the stuff. It's actually quite, and it's relatively inexpensive. So yeah, I think street art is really interesting. Obviously, a lot of it's political as well. So, and it encompasses posters and stickers and loads of stuff like that. So I got actually quite into street art. The only exhausting bit about it is it changes all the time. So whereas because I mean, I haven't been back since the pandemic, but I'm pretty sure it'll be the same. Yeah, same with the Tower. Street art, bloody nightmare, because it's nearly always on hoardings that are on areas where they're doing redevelopment. So then the redevelopment happens, the hoardings are taken away, and the street art's gone.
Yeah.
But there's still plenty of ones that have a long time, and they're in slightly inaccessible places, and so you can kind of rely on them. There's even 1 or 2 Banksys that are covered up with perspex so they don't get destroyed. But yeah, I got really into that, and also the way in which commercial companies climb in on it and try and be all like street arty.
Yeah, and like
so some of the street art in the East End is advertisement.
Yeah,
it's got the bloody Twitter feed, their Instagram feed of the company. It's really wicked. So yeah, it's interesting.
That is interesting. Yeah, I guess that kind of leads us on to my next sort of set of questions, which is like we've kind of discussed a bit about young people and engaging them. But so you spoke a little bit about the work you do with young people. So is it mostly schools that you,
student groups as well. I mean, American student groups come over. A lot of them want a tour of the City of London. So there, I did another course as well. I did one specializing on the city. So they want to do a bit about finance, which again is fine because the city's a great place because, so the City of London, is the center of London. It's weirdly called the City of London, which is where the financial center is. So it's both the oldest because it's where the Romans had Londinium, and it's also the newest. So although you can do the finance stuff, no problem, because I love talking about financial corruption. You can also do all the layers of history that are in there. You can show them some Roman wall, and that sort of thing. So yeah, student groups, school groups. Yeah, that's kind of it.
I think you kind of touched on this already as well, but do you find it difficult to engage them? I said you kind of mentioned some ways of engaging them quite fast, like using kind of like blood and guts or like something like that. But do you find that difficult or?
I mean, I think, well, for a start, a lot of young people, they keep a very blank canvas. They don't show that they're having a good time. That's fine because I've had kids. So I do know that, and it kicks in teenage years, just like you learn to put a face on. So then at the end of the tour, they'll go, "That was fantastic," but you never have known. So you've got to learn not to try and work out what, because unless there happens to be a friendly person in the group, you could have a whole blank, 10 blank faces. I mean, I guess, look, my style is pretty informal. I don't I'm not going to tell them the facts. If the facts are boring, I'm not going to bother with them. I sift through myself. I'm like, that's just boring. Like, why do you want to know that? You don't want to know it. You want to know the why. You want to know the why. That's what you want to know. It's like Colston. Do you care who sculpted it? No. Do you even care who Colston was? Why did they put the statue up? That's an interesting one. When did it go up? Up in his lifetime. It went up 150 years after he died or something like that. That's interesting. Okay. Who put the money up? That's interesting. So I'm just sifting through going, if I don't find it interesting, I've got a pretty short attention span. Luckily, I'm a little bit ADH, as you can probably tell, and a bit manic. So I have quite a young mentality in the sense of like, boring, 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 boring. Oh, okay, quite interesting that. Like that. Everyone likes a bit of controversy. So let's get down to that stuff. And also just like, what's the official line? But what's really going on here?
Definitely.
So there's lots of ways you can kind of play around with it. If you say something slightly irreverent early on, they kind of go, okay,
I'll listen now.
Interesting. So I mean, we're taught in the course a few classic things not to be boring. We're taught to do 5 minutes maximum before you move a group, which is a pretty good thing. And I would probably try and do less than that, especially with a young group.
So you're not just running around, basically.
No, so I went on a Call the Midwife tour. Okay, we're big fans. In Chatham Dockyards, amazing. The woman stood there for 15 minutes in the introduction, and we weren't even by anything that visually that was to do with Call the Midwife. And I was like, Kate, my partner, who knows, she was like holding my hand, going, "It's okay, Rob. Stay calm." It was just like, oh my god, it's fucking joking. So that's quite a good rule of thumb. That one. Just little techniques, engaging people, eye contact, always face the group, don't talk away from the group like
Yeah.
that. So, can't hear what you're saying. And really simple stuff, but you'd be amazed how many untrained guides just do it.
Just do it.
They're pretty much clock all of those things immediately.
Yeah, and I guess that's how sometimes like they get a reputation of being like doing a tour is boring, because it's
So boring.
kind of imagine that like standing there for ages looking at something.
Reading a script, we're taught never to script it, never ever script it.
Yeah.
Have a structure, because I teach on the course now. So you want a structure, because structures are really important, because they help people to listen to what you're saying. If you're linking the bits and you have a structure, it's not just random facts. And if you have a link at the end, that's genius. So you go, so we've looked at Old Colston, let's go and have a look at whatever, you make a link between what you just said. So it appears to be this lovely weaved narrative. And you link back to things you've already talked about, which helps them to feel like, oh, right, yeah, I remember him talking about that. Yeah. You feel a bit more like engaged and clever.
Yeah.
So there's little, all those techniques you just got to really pull in. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. I think it's what do I think? I don't know. No, I think it's really an important skill that I think people can just like think you can just go and do it because you are just whatever, you learn the script and you can just go to the next spot, and it seems pretty straightforward because if you know the way, then you're just taking them the way. But it actually, I think we've all, like you mentioned, the Call You Midwife tour, like been on bad tours, and you know that they are bad.
Yeah.
So yeah, having those skills is definitely really important.
I mean, you can go to one little place in like the Abbey or whatever and tell it in and you are taught to do this. Like you can do 5 minutes, because if you've got like, I don't know, like middle-aged Americans who just love it, fine, you can relax. You can give them a really relaxed 5 minutes on the coronation chair. You take a school group, they don't want to know that. So, right, look at the chair. It looks battered, doesn't it? It looks pretty knackered as a chair. Why is it so special? That's crazy, And they even restored it recently. When they decided to restore it, battered. What's that about? Do you know what I mean?
Completely.
That's a completely different way of presenting
so that
it.
kind of like leads into making it like, I was kind of going to ask you about how do we make culture more accessible and more inclusive, or how do we make these tours in general more accessible? Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, well, okay. One of the things that's come out of the pandemic and Black Lives Matter in particular is the idea that we need more BAME guides in London, and then they're everywhere. You need more diverse, should say. So you need all different age groups, outlooks, education, and to be fair, the Blue Badge Guide course was good for a number of things. So you have people from all over the world, because they're often guiding in their own language. So we've got Chinese students, Korean students, from India, from France, etc., right? They've also got better age groups, so there's a lot more younger guides now, which I think is really important. I'm not saying you have to be young. I just think young people bring a different perspective, as I did when I was young. And but I still think that we need more BAME guides, because London is like 40% BAME now. So that's a story that needs telling and a voice. So I have heard from they are thinking of recruiting. So I think, I think that would be really a positive thing in terms of engaging people.
And like showing a true representation of what London is, I guess.
So obviously for me as a middle-aged white heterosexual cisgender man, I try my best to include other narratives. I possibly be someone that you can identify with just purely from seeing me, but I can certainly reference those narratives. I don't think that's something I can't do. I do the slavery tour. I'm white. That's fine. I've done a fuck of a lot of research. I'm not just, like surfing on the what's it. I've talked to other BAME guides about it, been on tours and stuff. So I could do that, but it would be better. It would be better if there were loads more voices and more diverse voices doing it, to be honest. And that would engage. It definitely would engage. But I think it is also about thinking outside the box. So, like, the National Gallery, lovely. although I can even do the National Gallery as well, you know. And there's it's about approaches. So, for instance, I decided, you know, the Bechdel test. Do you know
Yeah,
the Bechdel test?
about the film.
The film one.
Yeah,
right.
feminist one.
Yeah. Two female characters need to talk to each other without not talking about man. Yeah, blah blah. So I thought, I'll tell you what, I'll do the Bechdel test on paintings. Yeah, in the National Gallery. You know, so it needs to be a painting of a woman by a woman, which doesn't have men in it or reference men or whatever. Yeah, she's not Mrs. So and so, right? I tell you, that is a tough call. I found one by Gwen John, who and it was of her, and I've forgotten the name of her female companion. It was brilliant though, because they went on a gap year, essentially in about 1911. We're talking, and she was the first woman to sort of do hippie chic. You know, so she was really like bohemian. So I got really into the two of them, and I introduced the idea of the Bechdel test with that painting. Now, I just know that is a really good way of engaging young people, because a lot of young people have heard of the Bechdel test. Yeah. And even if they haven't, it's a brilliant.
Yes, and it's an easy concept.
They love it if you explain it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, so we're in the fucking boring National Gallery, right, with 2D paintings. It's a really traditional oil painting, and yet I guarantee you could definitely get a young audience interested in that. You know, you get
that is interesting, and it can kind of make you go in to the gallery, because I've definitely been in that situation before, where like you kind of walk around, and you're like, this is all the same, or it's like, well, and then if you actually are looking for something in particular, it will make you look at the other paintings as well and be like, well, it's not. That's a cool idea.
I actually think almost all of those places are places that really need that approach. You know, you go to the National Gallery, 2,000 paintings, right? Where do you start? It's a mind dog.
Yeah.
And actually, I got a friend. She does, you know, she's really good at thinking of totally mental tours. She did, you know, when it's Moustache Movember. Yeah. So she did the moustaches tour, right? Just moustaches.
Yeah.
That's all they were interested in. But it's a way of getting people in. Yeah, and I definitely think there are some people, I mean, Movember's a very sort of particular, you know, demographic, isn't it? I would put it in the sort of 25 to 35, you know, whatever. You know, so, but they were engaged. She sold out completely.
Cool. Yeah.
Another one she did Sex and the City, in the city of London. And it was about women, you know, women's history in a way, social history. But it's a way of getting younger people in, because you literally get them in with just the title.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. I really like that. Because also, like you say, for the main sites, you know a bit of the history, and then all you have to do is like Google it, and then you know it. Like you can just download that, and you don't necessarily need somebody telling you the history of that. Whereas, like you say, if it's tailored to, if there's a certain aim and it's tailored and it's stories that you wouldn't necessarily be told. That's
so the one I'm preparing to do for the British Museum is an anti-imperialist tour. So it's not, I mean, people have done it before, but I just think it needs to be done more and more and more.
Yeah, definitely.
Because that's the interesting story, is why have we got all this stuff? And what are we going to do with it? You know, are we going to give back? Are we just going to go, no, we're not giving anything back? Because actually we haven't done that. We have given stuff back.
Yeah.
You know, in certain situations. So why are we not giving that stuff back, but we're giving that stuff back, and blah, blah, blah. You know, I just think the conversation needs to start. Yeah. And also people just need to be educated about how we got this stuff.
And if more people going to the museum are learning about it, like at the museum as well, like, you've frozen. Oh no, you haven't. If more people are actually getting this education whilst going to the museum, the conversation is just so much bigger and can keep happening.
Yeah, exactly. And then it puts pressure on the museum to have that conversation as well, which I think is really important, you know. So I think those are all ways in which I think if you just take a different approach, you know. Another colleague, she did a feminist tour of she does feminist Jack the Ripper tours.
Oh, that's nice.
And although I'm a man, I am thinking I might do it, just because it's social history basically, but it's based on this book, which I don't know if you know.
I think I've actually heard of it,
It's called The Five, and it's by Hallie Rubenhold. what she did is take the 5 women, the 5 sort of iconic victims of Jack the Ripper, and tell only their story. So there is nothing about Jack the Ripper at all, and nothing about the gruesome murders. She stopped every story at the moment when they were last seen.
Okay.
No more.
Yeah.
No autopsies, no, voyeuristic, misogynistic stuff. And of course, it's absolutely fascinating because it's social history from the 19th century and just how difficult women's lives were. And this idea that all 5 are prostitutes, is just absolutely mad, and so simplistic. I thought it was genius. And so the guides took it and kind of does a tour, because Jack the Ripper is a big business still. And I find it really kind of like, well, just disappointing. And in that the only one narrative pretty much is told.
Yeah.
And I just think that's a much more
kind
interesting
of glorified. Yeah.
So, that's another way in which you can take something. So it's not even about reinventing the wheel. You're still looking at the wheel, but you're just looking at it in a different way. So I think, loads of ways you can do that.
Yeah. No, that's great. So maybe just to wrap up, my last few questions that I've kind of been asking everybody is just how you define cultural heritage, or what cultural heritage means to you. Like why is it so important, kind of thing. I don't know.
Yeah. So I mean, it's weird, isn't it? I think it's we live in a place, we just live in it. Like, it's amazing how people just, they live in a street, in a district, they know nothing about it at all, and they go to a workplace and they know nothing about it as well. And modern life kind of makes us do that. Capitalism, if you like, makes us do that. And how disengaged is that? In London here, we've all just landed here. Most of us have landed here, either this generation or the previous one, or maybe a couple, much more than that. It's particularly stark in London, where immigration is a massive thing, and there's this anti-immigration and anti-refugee sort of narrative. And you're like, but this whole city was built by immigrants.
Yeah.
So we need to start telling that story, and then you'll realise that you're part of this. You are part of it. So you then start to engage with the area. Hilariously, Stoke Newington, where I live, was a centre of non-conformism, and although that doesn't mean what it now means today, I still think it's quite funny, because they were outsiders in a sense, because they're outside the Church of England, and now, of course, it means something slightly different. So, I just think I think it's really important you find yourself washed up wherever you find yourself washed up, whenever, and you need to look at your own cultural heritage and where you are and how that fits in, because actually then maybe you'll feel a bit more like you belong. I mean, London, I don't care how long they've been here, I go, you're a Londoner. That's fine by me. You've been here a year, you're a Londoner. Judging, right? So I just I guess it's important to feel grounded, but not in that sort of, in London it's weird, it's not in that way of like, my family have been here for many generations. And
it's constantly changing.
Really about that now.
Do you think there needs to be more emphasis on like preserving certain cultural heritage in London, or do you think that the constant movement is a good thing? It's
I think it generally is. It's stuff does get preserved. I mean, I'm a bit of an architectural conservative. I quite like to keep old buildings. If there isn't a good reason to tear them down, it's nice to keep them. And obviously, as a guide, we love little plaques and things like that, because they're little things to bounce off. And I mean, you should definitely preserve them. I mean, the Nazi ambassador's dog was electrocuted, just off the Mall in the central London. There is a grave there in German. Ein treuer Begleiter, true friend, Giro, the Alsatian. I mean, of course you want to preserve that. That's amazing. It's there. The embassy's gone, doesn't exist there anymore. There's Giro, and if you know and you can unlock that for people, you can go, isn't this amazing? Just literally, there's so much history in most places, really. I mean, it doesn't have to be London, I mean, the Romans stomped about the whole bloody country,
Yeah.
even right up into
Completely.
your neck of the
Yeah,
woods.
into Scotland.
I was looking at a lovely picture of the Antonine Wall
Yeah.
just the other day, and I was thinking,
Yeah.
oh, that's, you know, that's
Yeah,
not as
it's
impressive
true.
as Hadrian's, but it's more local.
No, it's still there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know.
Yeah. Cool. No, well, thanks so much for talking to me. It's been really interesting and just, yeah, cool to hear about what you do. And I think for so many people, especially for the people, well, it's a shame that we haven't been able to organize a trip to London, really, because I think people were so looking forward to it, because the history of London is so, like, it's so famous worldwide.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you say, we do need to think about different ways of teaching it, of like,
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the nice things is doing the of teaching on the course. And I mean, I am actually thinking of applying to run the course, because I just think that actually that's a really powerful, you know, I read all this stuff and I'm like, yeah, what can you do to make a difference? It's very difficult to think you can make a difference, but if you can actually train, you know, several years of guides to sort of look at it a little bit more differently, to take a slightly different approach, to be bold enough and brave enough to do that, that's quite a big thing, actually.
Yeah, definitely.
So the last 5 years I've been teaching on it. It's been quite fun because I've been doing the London history lectures, and you know, me and then my colleague, we've been doing a different line, you know, trying to plough a different line, and I think that's really important.
Can I just ask, is it expensive to do the Blue Guide course?
It's about I mean, I think it's pretty good value, but it is £6,000, I think.
Okay, and about 18 months.
18 months. Yeah, there's two lectures a week and a Saturday practical session.
Okay.
And then various other bits and bobs. And then you've got to pay for the exams.
Yeah.
But they have some help if you're under 30. They've got usually got 2 or 3 places, which are subsidised for people under 30. And there are other ways you can get money together.
And then once you're qualified, are you just able to go and be a freelance tour guide then? Is that
so then I mean, it's not very organized, you know, you've got to fight out there. It's like freelance hell, you know. But it's very well paid because it's unionized, and I mean, you know, unionized-ish. So we've all agreed on a rate, and if you're a Blue Badge guide, you won't work for under that rate. That's the whole point. So because of that, it is a viable career. Or even a half career, if you know what I mean. Like I do it half the time because I do the theatre the rest of the time, and it's very, you know, it's well paid. So the half of my time I'm well paid, and half the time I'm being exploited in the family business.
In the arts.
In the arts, exactly.
So, because what I didn't know, actually, I think you mentioned it earlier, was that people come from all over the world, because that makes total sense. Like you need everyone from like native speakers of languages to give tours. So
they've
really
got
cool, actually.
It's
actually opportunity, like a worldwide opportunity kind of thing.
They really try and do that. So I'd say maybe half of the students are non-native English speakers, and then a half of the English speakers have another language, and there's only about a quarter monoglots like me. So you have to be really good to be a monoglot, because the competition's like absolutely mad. You know, there's an entrance exam. You have to get a pretty high percentage as a monoglot to get on, whereas as a, let's say, Mongolian speaker, you know, you might get in, even if you've got a bit of a steep learning curve once you're in there. So there's guides in almost every language. There's a Welsh speaking guide, there's you know, Turkish, German, Italian, loads and loads of different ones, Urdu, Hindi, so it is an international business.
So thank you so much. Just to let you know, so the platform that we've created as part of this project is called the Cool Platform. This interview will be on there, and we've got a YouTube channel. I don't know if I've sent you the link, but I'll send it to you after. And you can also find us on Facebook. It's Culture Among Young People is the Facebook, and we're pretty active on that with all of the stuff that we've been doing. So I don't know if there's anything you want to promote.
It's called Cool Tour, is it?
Culture, so it's like culture, but with cool instead of cull, basically.
Cool.
COOLTUR.